Okay, so this is my fourth and I think will be my final video on the review for this plane. Got everything charged up. I still have the alternate motor in it. I haven't had a chance to modify the motor mount yet. But on the positive note, I had a 20 amp speed controller inside the plane when I performed the maiden flight, and I traded that out and put a 30 amp speed controller in it because even in the air, I think it's going to be pulling about 18 amps at full throttle. So that's a closer margin to the speed controller, what the speed controller is rated for, than I'm comfortable with. So I traded out the 20 amp speed controller for a 30 amp speed controller. I used the FMS Predator. I think there's a link in the show notes to the 40 amp version of that. But what I found by doing that, as I showed you before, that you could mount that 1300 milliamp battery, that 3S, either flat or you could put it on its edge. So what I found was I could bring the speed controller all the way up to the firewall, you know, on its side. There's a little recess right there where it fits right into, and then the battery I can put in on its edge. And then I was able to get this neutrally balanced at 50 millimeters back from the leading edge of the wing without having to add any additional weight to it. I thought, well, if I've got to add any additional weight, I might as well get a benefit from it. So I put in the heavier speed controller instead of using the 20, and that was enough. That was enough bringing it forward that it set it neutral at that 50 millimeters. So I'm real happy about that. So the all-up weight on this plane now is 682 grams. I was shooting for 650, didn't quite make it, but it's still going to have a 1.6 to 1 thrust to weight ratio. What I don't know is when I go out and do some aggressive flying with it, what kind of flight time you're going to get with it. My first two flights with this power system were 4-minute flights. I was just flying circuits, so it definitely was an aggressive flight. And if I remember correctly, I still had 11.7 volts in the battery when I landed after 4 minutes. So if you're just cruising around, even with this alternate power system in it, you're going to get a significant amount of flight time out of it. Probably, I don't know, 7-8 minutes out of it. So that's pretty good. And even though I wasn't doing aggressive flying, I'm having a hard time forcing myself to get out of the throttle, because you can, with this power system, you can launch this, hand launch this plane, even without without flaps on it, at about 50-55% throttle. It takes right off. So you can probably cruise around at about 40-45% throttle, as long as there's not a lot of wind out there that can upset the plane. But let's take it out. We're supposed to have 2 to 3 mile-an-hour wind out there this morning. We never have that. But if I have 3 or 4, that would be great. So we'll go out there and see what kind of wind we have and see if we can do some aerobatics with this plane. And then I will give you my conclusion on what I think of this airframe and the components that I chose for it. I will see you out at the field.
Alright, I'm back out here with the Fun Cub 1100. I do not have the calmer wind that they were forecast for this morning. It'll slow down to about 4 and then pick up to 8 on the ground, but we'll see what we can get from it this morning. So let's get it in the air. Hand launches beautifully. I launch it at about 60% throttle into the wind, and that works out really well. It looks like my CG is really good now. Yeah, going into the wind, and my sticks are centered right now. Going into the wind, it tracks beautifully. I'll throttle back a little bit. Isn't that nice? Good amount of elevator. That works out really well. I'm amazed at how well that holds its line. Loops are a little slow. I think I'm going to move my linkage on the ailerons. Get a little more throw on the ailerons. Little split S. This airframe was really, I mean, it was designed very well, man. This, for a big plane, and I'm not used to flying big planes like this or larger planes like this, but it is really, you know, even in some wind, it's super stable. And you saw the power from the power system that I have in here. I still have my alternate power system in it. But I was surprised that after, 4 minutes of fairly aggressive flying on it, I still had 11.5 volts in the battery. So I would say even with this power system, you could get about 6 minutes of fairly aggressive flying out of it and still have about 30% of the battery left. So it's a little more efficient in the air than I thought it was going to be. I'm always conservative on that number because I don't want to run out of battery, but look at that power. Man, that's about a 1.6 to 1 thrust to weight ratio with this power system. With the all-up weight that I have in it now. And I didn't have to add any additional weight to get the CG correct. Alright, so my timer's hitting me. Let's see if we can bring it in to this wind. Throttle back. Yeah, not nearly as good as my landing yesterday. But what do you guys think of this Fun Cub, man? I mean, did you see how much power that had? I'll put another battery pack in it and take it up again. But man, I am pretty impressed with this airframe. Okay, so let's get our Fun Cub 1100 back in the air before the wind picks up anymore. It seems to be building instead of slowing down. Let's get it in the air. I was about 55% there on the hand launch. Throttle back a little bit. Love that power. Man, you could just, I want to come out here when it's calmer wind and just rip up the sky with this plane. Man, this airframe is just awesome. Look at that climb. Can you believe that? That is sweet. This thing's got enough power you can fly it like a park jet. Just need to get that roll rate fixed, and that is going to be too sweet. I noticed that now that I have that balanced really well, I'm not having to put nearly as much rudder into it to get a nice, smooth, coordinated turn out of it as much as I can with the experience that I have with this plane. This is my 6th flight now on this plane. But nice coordinated turn. I'm not having to put in as much rudder as I had before. I think it was maybe still slightly tail heavy on that second flight, on the right after the maiden. But that looks nice and smooth now, doesn't it? Ooh, wind. Whoa, wind. Look at that climb. Man. Alright, one more circuit. I'm going to bring it in before it gets any windier, since my landings are usually less than stellar anyway. And there's my timer. But how sweet is that?
Okay, so got 2 additional flights on it. We got to test some of the aerobatic capability, and I was really surprised at how well that handled with a neutral balance at 50 millimeters back from the leading edge. And like I said, when I balance my planes, when I set the CG, the plane is, you know, it's not, the tail is not low, the nose is not low, it's perfectly balanced, straight and level. So I stand by what I said before. I think if you set your CG, if you like to fly with the plane a little nose heavy, because it does make planes more stable, less maneuverable, but it does add a little stability to the plane, then I would set it somewhere between 45 to 50 millimeters if you like a neutral balance on your plane. Then set it at 50 millimeters back from the lead edge, and it seemed to perform really well with the CG in that location. So I was kind of lucky that I chose the proper CG location for this plane. But it tracked great. I don't even have one click of trim in my transmitter. The only thing I had to do after the first flight was I had a little tiny bit of positive pitch in the left aileron, and that was causing it to slowly creep to the left. So I manually adjusted that last night, and then when I took it out today, it was flying perfectly level. You know, it wasn't ascending, it wasn't descending, and it was not drifting to the left or to the right. So I'm really happy about that. As you saw from the loops, the elevator has plenty of movement on it. I did increase the ailerons a bit, but because these servos have so much travel, I couldn't go above 90% on the dual rate, otherwise the control arm would come up against the foam, you know, where it's cut out for the control arm. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my linkage and I'm going to move it down to the, I'm going to move it up one hole on the control horn on the ailerons to give me quite a bit, should give me quite a bit more movement on the ailerons at 90% dual rate. I don't think I'll have to go higher than that. I think at that point it'll have a fairly decent roll rate to it. So plenty of rudder, plenty of elevator. I just need to get a little more throw on the aileron. I did not show you my last landing because it was terrible. It was worse than the first one, but it did stay on its wheels, you know. So moving this landing gear forward to the forward position, because it has 2 different positions. Not only does that help get your CG correct with a smaller motor, but it also keeps this thing from tipping over, you know, on its nose when you come in for a landing. Out there in that dirt, sand, and gravel, that's awesome. It's about the only plane that I have that will do that. So let me see. Oh, and the efficiency on this power system was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I'm always very conservative. I take the amount of amps that the system is pulling when I'm holding it in a static position on the thrust stand, and I reduce that by 25%, and that is my estimate for the number of amps that the power system is going to be pulling at full throttle when the plane is moving through the air, when the motor is able to unload. That would have put this motor at about 18 amps at full throttle when it was moving through the air. Looking at the fairly aggressive flights that I had with it and the battery voltage when I landed, it's obviously pulling less than 18 amps. It might be down around 15, because I still had and the 1300 milliamp hour LiPos, and those LiPos are old. Those are some of the first LiPos I ever purchased, so they're at least 4 years old, and starting to show their age a little bit, but I still had 11.5 volts in the pack when I landed. So that's pretty impressive. So even with my old LiPos, my old 1300 milliamp 3S LiPos, I should be able to get 6 minutes of fairly aggressive flight out of this and still have 30% left in the pack. So, and I rarely take my packs down below 30% of their capacity. So that worked out really well. So I think that this alternate power system is actually a very viable power system for this. And you saw the vertical climb on it. I mean, this is a fairly aerobatic little bush plane, and I think the airframe is designed extremely well. I mean, it is very stable in the air, and at this weight, it feels like it has very low wing loading. So you can fly it fairly slowly, and you saw not today's landing, but the other day's landing when I was coming in, how slow and soft it set down when there wasn't as much wind as there was today. I mean, last time it was fairly breezy, but today it was even worse. So no, I'm extremely happy with this airframe. I think what you get for the money, I think it's an extremely good value, and I think that the components that I put in here worked out really, really well. Okay, I had to go calculate the total. So are you ready for this number? Here's the components that are in it. Of course, the Fun Cub kit, it was on sale for $59.99. It is now $69.99, and that's the price I included in the bill. So the airframe is $69.99. The Racerstar 2212 1800 kV 2S to 4S motor is $5.62. The prop that I have on here, as I had these on hand, are JXF composite props. They're 8x4 props. Come in a pack of 2, $1.11 a piece. The Gemfan 8x4 props are about, the APC style props are about the same price, maybe a couple of cents less than the JXF. So I will have links to those in the show notes too. The most expensive component that I put in it was the 12-gram Metal Gear digital servos. Now, this plane ended up being light enough with what I've got in it that if you wanted to use 9-gram servos, whether they were Metal Gear or nylon, digital or analog. Now, I like digital servos. I think they hold their center position better than analog does. But $20.79 for the 4 Racerstar 12-gram Metal Gear digital servos. 4 of them all the way around. A speed controller that I had in there, FMS Predator 20 amp brushless ESC with a 2 amp linear back. It does have a JST plug on it, so you would have to switch that out to whatever you want to use for your to match your battery. It could be an XT30 with the amount of amps this is pulling. It could be an XT30. It Could be an XT60. I happen to have XT60s on mine, just in case I want to put an even bigger, motor on, a more powerful motor on it. I can't see that happening with a 1.6 to 1 thrust to weight ratio, but you know me, I like power, so. The one that I have in there now is a 30 amp speed controller. I could not find the 30 amp FMS Predator on Banggood's site. They had the 20 and they had the 40, but I could not find the 30. And looking at the efficiency of the power system when it was in the air, like I said, I think it's only pulling around 15 amps at full throttle, so you could definitely use 20 amp speed controller with it, make the plane even a little bit lighter. That's $10.99, and I threw $1 in there for the cost of the XT60 or XT30 connector that you may have to put on it. That brings the total plug and fly build for this plane, as you saw it flying, to $109.50. If you decided to use 4 9-gram nylon gear digital servos instead of the 12-gram metal gear digital servos, you could knock another almost $15 off of it. It would bring the plug and fly build down to $97.10. So you can easily build this plane with everything you need, less the receiver and the LiPo, for under $100. So I think this plane is an exceptional value for what you get. You saw how it flew. It's extremely stable in the air. It has light wing loading. It has an extremely powerful power system on it, 1.6 to 1 thrust to weight ratio. It's very aerobatic. Need I say more? So yeah, I think this is an excellent plane, and the components I think work extremely well in it. I give this a big thumbs up. So there you go. That's what I think of this plane. And is it a keeper? Yeah, it's definitely a keeper. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the air.